There, I forgot to resume recording. Do this whole great recording and then I forget to record it. All right. All right, well, you guys are all here. It's 9:32 on my clock, so we're going to get started. Just want to remind you today we're going to keep going with our lecture on chapter 14. I'm going to have you get the homework ready for Thursday, and whatever part of the lecture we don't cover today, we'll wrap up on Thursday and review the homework. And then I believe we have a test. And let me go to Connect really quick. You're not going to see it. I'm just going to go in there very quickly. I've got so many things happening, so I just want to make sure I say the right thing to you. Okay, so then I still need to get test 2 for chapter 14 together, so you guys can take that on Connect, and I'll get that today. I make myself a note. Okay, and I think we'll have that due. Oh, I think I have the test due already by April 3rd. So we got to make sure we have that part, that test for chapter 14. I'm extending that out. So you'll have that due by April 3rd. The homework, graded homework smart book, if we didn't do the smart book already, and the Tableau will all be due on March 29th. And then we'll be getting into the next chapter, which will be 12. And that's on investments. So I'm pretty sure, yeah. So that's the plan as of right now. Okay, anybody have any questions on that? Going back to the slideshow. Okay, so you guys can unmute yourself if you have a question as we're going through, or you could pose a chat question, and if I don't see it, then somebody else say, hey, there's a chat question there, and you're ignoring it. You know, we're kind of going by the seat of our pants here still. So the important thing is that we get back to the content and keep moving forward with intermediate accounting. As for the group projects, I don't see us having a presentation for group projects. It was a great idea too. I really wanted to do this where we had accountants there and everybody was presenting and dressed really nice, but as of right now, I don't even know if we're probably closed through April 6th. I have not received the official announcement yet, but I'm guessing that will be coming down the pike. And quite honestly, there's so many schools that are just continuing in this remote presentation through the end of the semester that you can put yourself on mute, please. I'm going to mute you. Okay. That I see us not even coming back into the classroom. That's me. And so I'm not going to proceed through the semester thinking we're going to have these presentations in front of all these people and, you know, like we originally planned. So our group project will just be a paper. Now, that's the other thing. Even remotely, guys, we can all be communicating with one another. So I want to know if there's group members that are not speaking to one another. Either you guys have to find a way to do it through email, through the phones. I know 1 or 2 people have already reached out to me. So I'm giving everybody the opportunity now to fix any kind of communications that have been broken down. If you need me to connect you with each other, I could do that. I'm pretty sure you can email each other through Blackboard, talk on the phone. I can have you use Blackboard Collaborate so that you all can set up your groups and talk to each other through Blackboard Collaborate. So we have many different tools out there to keep our group project going. I have many online courses that there's group projects and people are able from across the world be able to complete this. So there's no reason we can't do this. It's just about us keeping communication within our group and working through it. Also, 2 groups, I'm not sure which ones I saw, and maybe the 3rd group did submit their part 2 of the project, which was the accounting principles. I need you to do that if you were that group that didn't submit it yet. I'm going to be looking at that in the next day or 2, giving you feedback. Shortly, I'll be going over the next part of the project in a little workshop for you to access and see what you should be doing for part 3, which is really the real guts of this presentation. So maybe I'll even hold a separate live workshop and record it and then put it out there. So if anybody wants to attend it live with questions, you can do that. But that's in the next week or 2. So just some upcoming events happening and making sure we're on the same page. Okay, any questions right now? All right, then back to chapter 14. Now in chapter 14, as you know, we've been talking about bonds. And we looked at selling a bond, a corporation selling a bond. And let's just review a little bit, just so we, I'm not going through every little nook and cranny, but just to remind us, a bond, again, is when a corporation is borrowing money from the public. The issuing corporation is obligated by law to repay a face amount, which is on a bond certificate at a specified maturity date. We refer to the face amount sometimes as the principal, the par value, the stated amount, or even the maturity value. So we have different terms to use in place of each other. They're all synonymous. They also promise to pay periodic interest. The interest is calculated by taking the principal of the bond that's on the bond certificate times a coupon or stated rate that is on the bond certificate times time. And that interest is paid at certain intervals over the life of the bond. Now, I'm just going to kind of skip now. We looked at the different characteristics and we said, okay, a corporation gets together, the board of directors gets together at some date and says, hey, let's sell a bond. And it may not be maybe a month or 2 until they actually do sell it and raise the money. The day they get together and they're deciding on this bond, they have to decide what kind of interest rate to pay on the bond. And sometimes that interest rate, and what they're doing at this date, I should say, is trying to guess on the day we sell the bond, what will be the interest rate other bonds are offering that are similar to ours. And that interest rate on the day of the sale is called the market interest rate. So we try to predict our contract rate as close as possible to that, but we don't know the future amount, so we're guessing. So when a company is doing this, they're really taking a shot in the dark. Now I'm pulling up, this is a company that predicted correctly. Masterware issued their 700,000 face or principal value bonds that offer 12% interest on January 1, and they sold for 700,000. We talked about this. If the market interest rate is the same as the contract interest rate, or I should say, if what you offer on your bond, the contract is the same as the market, the bonds will sell at their face value. You won't accept less, and nobody will pay more, because no matter whose bond is purchased on that date, 12% interest is being paid. Now, we then saw, all right, sometimes that doesn't happen. Oops, I'm sorry. We looked at selling the bond. Sorry, I'm looking for my one slide and may not even, God, I don't want that. Oh, sorry. Bear with me. I'm not having a good day today. Here we go. Determining the selling price. So when our interest rate, the stated interest rate on our bond is 12%, you notice it's always 12% here, is the same as the market interest rate on the date of sale, the bond will sell at its face value. What happens though if the market interest rate is up here and our bond interest rate is down here? Well, the only way we can get somebody to buy the bond, and the only way somebody will buy the bond, is if the bond is sold for less than its face value or at a discount. And we looked at what happens when a bond does sell at a discount. Today, we're going to now focus on what happens if the opposite happens. The market rate is down here. Our bond rate is up here. Now remember, as I said the other day, we can't grab our bond certificate, grab a bottle of white out, and change our interest rate to 10% when the market interest rate is 10%. We're locked in. We're stuck paying 12%. So how do we adjust, and how does the market adjust so that we're only actually paying 10%? And we're going to look at that now. And that is selling bonds. I'm not even going to go through that. Selling bonds at a premium. So when bonds sell for more than their face amount. Now, why does this happen? Remember, the corporation is locked in 12%. Everybody else is paying 10%. The corporation only wants to pay 10%, but they can't change the interest rate. They're locked into paying 12%. So how do they make up for that? They sell the bond for more. And it's almost like the bondholder is prepaying them for the part of the interest rate difference, for the interest that they're paying extra above the 10%. So they sell at a premium or for more than their face value. Now, to determine the selling price of the bond, remember, you are able to do this. You calculate the present value of the interest payments, the present value of the principal, using the market interest rate. Interest is calculated by taking the face amount of the bond, that principal, times the contract rate on the bond, 12%. Now, when interest is paid twice a year, we've got to allocate between those two interest payments. So 700,000 times 12% times 6/12, 42,000 in semi-annual interest payments will be made every 6 months for the next 3 years. So when we're calculating the present value of this ordinary annuity, N will be 6, the total number of interest payments. I will be the market interest rate, but since interest is paid twice a year, we've got to divide that by 2. So 5% will be the interest rate we use for determining the present value. So if you use the ordinary annuity table at the end of your book, present value, when N is 6 and I is 5%, your factor will be 5.07569. Multiply that by your interest you're actually paying, so that's the payment in your annuity. The present value of those interest payments are $213,179. You also need to determine the present value of that one lump sum future maturity date payment of $700,000 using the same N and the same I. Use the present value of one table though, because you want to know how much is that $700,000 worth today. So it's a separate computation. 700,000 times the factor would be 0.74622, 522,354. Now add those two together, and that's the selling price of the bond, 735, 533. So you can see this bond is selling for $35,533 more than its face value. That difference is the corporation actually receiving money to, it's like a prepaid interest from the bondholder. Pay us that extra now, we'll pay you 12% over the life of the bond. But the bondholder is making up the difference in the interest rates by paying more upfront. So over the life of the bond, how much expense does the company actually have? 10%, not 12. They pay 12, but their actual expense is going to be 10% because they receive some of the money from the bondholder the day they sell the bond. So let's see how that is recorded. But before I do that, are there any questions at all on determining the cost of a bond, what it sells at? Okie dokie. So when we sell it at a premium, we're going to debit cash at the corporation for $735,533. We're going to credit the bonds payable for the full $700,000. You always credit the payable of the issuing corporation for the full amount of the face value, I should say. The difference is credited to a special account called premium on bonds payable. Now, premium on bonds payable is kind of like your contra accounts, but it has one little difference. This account is called an adjunct account. Contra accounts keep track of information about another account, and they always decrease the other account. Adjuncts also keep information about another account, but they always increase the other account because they have the same balance, or they increase on the same side as their buddy account. So premium on bonds payable increases bonds payable on a balance sheet, but we call it an adjunct account because it adds instead of subtracts. Now what's in there? Just like with discount, that's interest. It's a lump sum amount of interest being paid by the bondholder today to make up for that interest rate difference. So that over the life of the bond, the corporation is really only going to be paying 10% interest. Now, we'll just take a look from the investor side. What happens when United buys this bond? Well, they're going to debit investments in bonds. That's an asset to them. They're going to debit premium on bond investment, and they're going to credit cash. Okay, so they have similar journal entries, but it's from the perspective of the investor. When I say similar, I just mean they separate it out the same. But to the United, the investor, this is an asset. So they keep track of it in asset accounts. Just like the scenario where we sell the bond for a discount, and how do we determine the amount of the discount to take out each interest payment period and put as interest? We do the same thing with premium, except when we take premium out, we don't increase interest expense, we actually decrease it. Okay, so let's see what happens here. We do an amortization schedule, and it has the same columns as it did for a discount. And we do the same type of calculation. So we start with the outstanding balance of the bond, or the carrying value. Remember, carrying value will be the face amount, and in this case, since it's a premium, plus, excuse me, plus the premium on bonds payable account balance. So the day the company sells the bond, the outstanding balance or carrying value of the bond is the selling price of the bond. Now let's look, and we could see each interest payment over the next 3 years. How much interest is actually being paid on June 30th to the bondholder? $42,000. 700,000, 12% interest times 6/12. But how much interest expense should be recorded? We calculate it the same way as we did before. Take the outstanding balance of the bond, the carrying value at the beginning of the interest period, times the market rate of interest, 10%, times 6/12, because it's paid semi-annually. So the amount of interest expense will be $36,777. Now, I remember learning this going, whoa, they're paying $42,000. How can you only debit interest expense for $36,777? Remember what I said. This bondholder paid us the difference. between what we actually pay and what we record as an expense, because we received that whole lump sum of money up front when we sold the bond. So part of that $42,000 we already got in cash from the bondholder. So how much are we really paying this time? $36,777. The other $52.23 is going to come out of that premium on bonds payable pot that we created the day the bond was sold. So let me see if it's, I didn't look at this slide. Of course not. Okay. Let me go back and let me show you. I don't know why they don't do this, but let's stop sharing this. Let me go into a Word document and we'll look at the journal entry for the first interest payment. Excuse me. Oh, I see a chat. Sorry. Oh, okay. Thanks, Chris. So I'm going into Word and I'm going to open up a document and I'll get this saved or shared right now. Oh, where's my Word? Okay, I was going to do that. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know why it's not there. Okay, hold on. Let me try it again. Share. There it is. Okay. So the first interest payment then says debit interest expense $36,777. So interest expense will be debited $36,777. Now remember, the day we sold this bond, we credited premium on bonds payable. So in order to reduce it, we must debit it. For how much? The amount we just determined, $52.23. So that $52.23 will be the $42,000 minus the $36,777. And then we credit cash for the $42,000. So we might have paid cash of $42,000, but part of it was already given to us as premium. So the true amount of expense to the company when we sell a bond at a premium will be less than the actual cash we pay out at each interest payment period, $36,777. So that's the journal entry. And those are the accounts you will debit and credit each interest payment. So I'm going to go back over to my PowerPoint here. Oops, share that. Okay. So now let's take a look. What happens when that journal entry is complete? Well, if we make a T account of the premium on bonds payable account. So I have a T account, premium on bonds payable. It starts with a credit balance of $35,533 on the day we sell the bond, right? We credited that. But what do we do just at the end of this first interest payment? Well, we debited it for $52.23. So after that first interest payment is recorded, our account goes from $35.53 down to it decreases by $52.23 down to $30,310. So the new carrying value of the bond after that first interest payment will be the $30,310 plus $700,000. To calculate the second interest payment, well, the cash actually going out is $42,000, but how much is debited to interest expense? Take the new carrying value of the bond, $730,310, times market interest rate of 10%, times 6/12, $36,516. The difference between the $42,000 and the $36,516 is how much you will debit the premium on bonds payable. So now you're going to decrease it another $54.84. If you did this in your T account, and you could do, the journal entry is the same. You just now substitute these numbers in there. So you'll be debiting interest expense, $36,516, debiting the premium on bonds payable, $54.84, crediting cash for $42,000. Well, now our carrying value will be at $700,000 plus the new balance in the premium on bonds payable, $24,826. Next interest payment. Notice cash doesn't change. No, we talked about this. That's locked in stone. You said, I will pay you 12% interest on $700,000 twice a year, every 6 months. So it's always going to be $42,000 every interest payment. The interest expense calculation, though, is now based on the new carrying value of $724,826. Multiply that by 10% times 6/12, $36,241. The difference between $42,000 and $36,241 is the amount you will debit the premium on bonds payable, $57.59. Make your journal entry. That now decreases your premium on bonds payable to $19,067 and your new carrying value to $719,067. Next interest payment. $42,000 in cash is going out. Calculate interest expense by taking the new carrying value of $719,067 times the market rate times time, 6/12. Interest expense would be debited for $35,953, and then the difference is debited to the premium on bonds payable. And you continue doing that each interest payment. Notice at the end, your calculation forces basically, you had to round a little bit. You see the little asterisk might be off a couple cents. But when you subtract the cash paid from your computation for interest expense, it will equal the balance that's currently in your premium on bonds payable. So you'll reduce it for that amount. Now your premium on bonds payable is 0. So your carrying value is at $700,000. You have successfully allocated all $35,533 of your premium. You might have paid $252,000 in actual cash, but remember, you got $35,533 of it up front. So how much did you actually pay over the life of the bond? $216,467. And that will equate to a 10% interest rate. So whether the market rate is higher or lower, the bond price adjusts, and that difference in selling price and face amount is then allocated to interest using this effective interest method, each interest payment date. Any questions? Okie dokie. I'm not really sure why they put this here, but you could take a look. And you could see it's just basically a picture of what happens to the carrying value of the bond when you sell it at a discount or a premium. So remember, when you sell a bond at a discount, over time, the carrying value keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. Yes, because the discount account is decreasing, 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 because you're taking a part of the discount amount out and putting it into interest expense. Same with premium though, but it's opposite. Over time, the premium carrying value decreases, and that's because premium is decreasing. The premium balance is decreasing, so the amount you add to your face value is decreasing over time to the point where it's 0. And that's what we're accomplishing. So it's just a picture to depict that's what we did. Okay, now, we got to kick it up a notch or two. So we saw the basics, right? Now let's start throwing some snafus in there. So let's take a look at the first snafu. What happens when financial statements are prepared between interest dates? In our example in this bond, we had a beautiful scenario. The bond sold January 1, interest was paid June 30th and December 31st. So all of our interest occurred during that 1 year period. What happens if, say, you sell the bond in March and you pay interest April, May, June, July, August, September, and March, and your year ends December 31st? Now we have some issues. So let's take a look. On January 1, 2021, Industries issued 700,000 12% bonds dated January 1. There's your interest. It's payable semi-annually. Everything's going to remain the same. Let's keep it a beautiful, oh, they sold them when the market rate was 14%. That means they sold them at a discount, right? And don't worry, I'm not worried about them buying them. Here's the deal. Masterware, the company selling the bonds, their year ends on October 31st. So if you take a timeline, draw a timeline, draw a horizontal line, right? January 1 is when they sell them. The first interest payment happens June 30th. The second happens 12/31. Oh, but draw a big vertical line right before the 12/31. The year ends 10/31. So that second interest payment falls into 2 years because the year ends October 31st. So how do we account for that? What happens? Well, we have to ask ourselves. There we go. On October 31st, should we record any interest related to this bond? And the answer is yes. Interest happens every second of every day. So we say, when's the last time we paid interest on this bond and did a journal entry related to the interest? June 30th. When's the next time we will? December 31st. Oh, okay. Now, I'm going to take it back to our amortization schedule for the discount. So take a look here. And this was in your PowerPoints. There it is. So we're focused on, whoops, I'm sorry about that. We're focused on this line here. If the year didn't end, that would have been everything we would have recorded on December 31st for $42,000 in actual cash paid, $46,991 in 6 months of interest expense, and a total of $49.91 reduction in the discount account. Okay, so I jotted those down, and now I'm going to go back to this slide. Sorry about that. All right, so here's what happens October 31st. 4 months of those 6 months in that interest payment period have passed. 4 months. So 4 months of that line should be recorded in a journal entry. So we will take 4/6 of the total interest expense of $46,991 and debit interest expense. We will reduce the discount on bonds payable, not by 4/6 of $46,991, but a 4/6 of $49,991. That's an error there. So that should be $4,991 times 4/6. We don't credit cash on October 31st. We're not paying this until December 31st. So we credit interest payable for 4/6 of the amount of cash that will be paid, $42,000. So we're recording the interest that has occurred between June 30th and October 31st, and we're reducing the discount for that time period. And we're letting people know we didn't pay that yet. As of October 31st, we owe $28,000. Now, from the investor standpoint, they do the same thing, but they would debit interest receivable for the amount of interest that's owed to them. They would debit discount on bond investment, and they would credit interest revenue. So since they are the investor and this is revenue to them, that's the approach they would take. Now, what happens on December 31st back at Master Corporation? Well, now they are paying the interest. So the other 2/6 of the $46,991 is shown as interest expense because it occurred in this new fiscal year. They're going to debit interest payable for the whole $28,000 that we originally stored in there on October 31st. They're going to credit the discount on bonds payable for the 2/6, the $49.91 they still need to remove. And they're sending out all the cash of $42,000. So credit cash, $42,000. So just kicking it up a notch when that interest payment period has the year end during it. Some of the interest is recorded as an expense in one accounting period, some in the other, and the same with the removal of the discount. Now, from the investor's perspective, they're going to get the cash on December 31st, $42,000, so they're going to debit cash. They're going to debit their discount on bond investment, $1,664. They're going to credit the interest receivable for that full $28,000 they originally debited it for back on October 31st. And then they credit interest revenue for 2/6 of the interest because that's revenue to them. Part of it they showed on October 31st, the remaining part they show on December 31st because their year ended during the interest period. Are there any questions on that? Okie dokie. I'm going to keep moving then. Now, if you're gone, I think I remember learning an easier way of doing all this. You're right. Probably back in Accounting 112 if you're gone. I remember doing something like straight line. Some companies, if the straight line method of removing discount or premium is not significantly different than the effective interest method, like we've been doing on that table, they will use that instead. So we're just going to show you it. It's much easier. So there's all of our scenario. Under the straight line method, we don't use a table and do all kind of calculations. Here's what we do. We go, every interest payment date, assuming our year ends December 31st, we're going to credit cash for the amount of interest we're actually paying. When we sell the bond at a discount, in this case, I forget the total discount. Let me go back to that slide so we can see where we're getting these numbers from. It was back in the beginning. This bond sold for $666,633. Its face value is $700,000. So it sold for a discount of $33,367. Okay. Under the straight line method, it says this. Take the total amount of your discount, $33,367, and divide it by the number of interest payments. You could see this down at the bottom. The periods are the number of interest payments. And every interest payment date, credit or remove $5,561 out of the discount on bonds payable, and then we would debit interest expense for the amount of cash paid and the amount of discount being amortized or removed, $5,561. So the total interest expense will be cash plus discount on bonds payable added together. So that's another option. But we learned the effective interest method. First of all, it's more accurate. And of course, that's what you would be tested on the CPA exam. But let's take a look. under this first interest payment. Now, by the way, guys, this will always be your journal entry on every interest payment date. It doesn't change. Cash is credited $42,000. This amount you take out, it's straight line. So it's the same amount every interest period. And that will always be the debit to interest expense, $47,561. Now let me just go back to our discount on bonds payable. Here was the amortization using effective interest method. Interest expense is not $47,561. Now some of it's close, but you could see it varies each time. So would this company use straight line? I don't know. It all depends. And it really depends on how material the difference. $47,561 versus $46,664. That's a $900, almost $1,000 difference, $1,100. And then it goes the other way. So the company would have to make that determination. We're just showing you that if they're very close, they may want to use the straight line method and would be allowed to. And that's what we're showing you there. Let me go back. Okay, now from the investor standpoint, if they use straight line, which by the way, they're not going to call each other up on the phone and go, hey, are you guys going to amortize straight line or effective interest method? They're separate companies. Who cares? Okay, so if United, the investor, said, we're going to remove discount on a straight line basis, they would have the similar type of, they would have the same exact dollar amounts, but their journal entry would be a debit to cash of $42,000. They would debit their discount on bond investment account for the $55.61, figure it out the same way, and credit interest revenue $47,561. So you see it from the issuer, the corporation issuing the bonds, and the company, in this case, purchasing the bonds, the investor. Now, if you did an amortization schedule straight line, they're all the same numbers. Okay, now the thing that does change is your carrying value. And the only reason we show you this is to show that at the end, all of the discount will be removed. These numbers over here, outstanding balance, are not used for any other purpose but to show you what the carrying value is. And there's the materiality concept, by which an appropriate application of GAAP can be bypassed for reasons of practical expediency in situations when doing so has no material effect on the results. So it gives you an option of using it. But we're worried about the effective interest method for this class more than the straight line. Okay, so we've looked at what happens when we sell the bond at face, premium, discount, when the year ends between during an interest period, and using straight line to amortize or remove the discount or premium. There's other costs that are associated with selling a bond, and they're called debt issue costs. Now, what are these? Well, it depends. They're normally legal and accounting fees, printing costs, in addition to registration and underwriting fees. So we may need to pay to have our bonds put onto a market. We may need to pay somebody, the underwriter, to sell the bonds for us. So there's other costs involved. So if these bonds are sold to one investor, we call them private placement. We just sell them to one person, like a pension fund or an insurance company would. Or we sell the bonds to an insurance company, one company. They're not going to be trading them. The issuing company incurs only issue costs. Now, if we sell them through a third party, that's an underwriter. This is a person who commits to purchase the bonds at a set price and resell them to the public, like an investment bank does. That's where the underwriting fee comes in. So we just want to make sure you understand the difference there. Now, what happens? Well, let's look at an example. We record these costs by combining them with any discount or premium. Take a look. January 1, 2021, Masterware Industries issued 700,000 12% bonds dated January 1, just like we have seen through this whole PowerPoint. They're going to pay $42,000 of interest twice a year, June 30th, December 31st. The bonds mature in 3 years. The market rate was 14% when they sold them. The entire bond issue was purchased by United Intergroup. The company incurred the issue cost of $14,000. So what happens? Credit bonds payable, $700,000. Debit cash for the discounted bonds, because they would have sold at $666,633. That was their selling price, minus the issue cost of $14,000, increases our discount. Okay, so we will debit that debt issue cost into the discount account. Now, the effective rate of interest is the one that caused the present value of the 6 interest payments to go from an amount of $700,000 to $652,633. Give me 1 second. So the actual semi-annual interest rate that will be used to calculate interest expense will be 7.4389%. Oh, I'm sorry. So what this is saying is that you're not going to use the actual market rate. Okay? It's the effective rate that would be used to calculate interest expense, because interest expense isn't just going to be the cash paid and the discount, but also the debt issue costs. So we can't just use 14% times 1/2. So we would need to be given that in order to calculate the discount amount that needs to be taken out correctly, because it just doesn't house that $33,367. It also includes the other $14,000. Okay, so that's how we account for these additional costs. Take a look. June 30th, Mabry Corporation issued 15 million of its 8% bonds for 13.8 million. So they had to sell them at a discount. The bonds are dated June 30th. If the effective interest method is used, how much should the bond discount be reduced for this first 6 months? So this is just normal discount. So it would be $90,000. Here's how we get it. We would take the amount the bond sold for, that's their current carrying value, $13,800,000, times the market rate of 10%. So when you see their price to yield 10%, that means the market rate is 10%, times 6/12, twice a year interest payment. So total interest expense is $690,000. The company has to pay cash of $15 million times 8% times 6/12, or $600,000. So the difference between the total interest expense recognized, debited to interest expense, and the part that is paid out in cash reduces the discount on bonds payable. Now we did this in a table, but you can do it this way as well when you know the different items. Take a look at another one. The corporation issued 10 million face amount bonds on January 1, 2021. Bonds are 10-year maturity. They pay interest semi-annually. And here's their partial bond amortization schedule. So they sold for $11,487,747. The company calculated interest of $344,632. That's the interest expense. cash, 400,000. The decrease in the balance of the premium account in this case is 55,368. So the premium balance goes from 1,487,747. How do I know that? Well, the current outstanding balance, or I should say the beginning, is 11,487,747. The bonds have a face of 10 million. So the difference between the outstanding balance and the face amount is the balance of the premium. So 1,487,747. That is multiplied by the interest, then by 6/12. But what's the interest rate? We'll work backwards. Remember, interest in this case is 344,632. That equals your outstanding balance of 11,487,747 times your interest rate times time, which is 1/2. So you have to use some algebra here, right? So if we take 11,487,747 times 0.5, 574,3874. Now divide that into 344,632. This is where our algebra comes in. The interest rate for 6 months is 6%. So let's test it. Let's take the outstanding balance at the end of the first interest payment, 11,432,379 times 6%, which is a 6-month interest rate. Whoops. What'd I do wrong? I did something wrong. Let me see. 11,487,747 times 0.5. 344,632. Anybody catch what I'm doing wrong? 6%. Looks like I need to do another 5% there. Yeah, I'm doing something wrong with my algebra. Interest equals 344,632, 11,487,747 times the interest rate. I could just do times the interest rate there. Let's do it this way. 344,632 divided by 11,487,747 gives us a 3%, let's do it that way, interest rate. So that's going to be the interest rate we use to calculate the interest. So 11,432,379 times 0.03 will give us the interest, the effective interest for the second interest payment. Then if we take 11,375,350 times 0.03 gives us our interest for the third interest payment. So what this is saying is, let me see, what is the, oh yeah, that makes sense. $10 million times 0.08 is it, so right now the interest rate is 8% on the bonds, twice a year times 0.5, $400,000 would be our interest. So the 6-month interest rate on our bonds is 4%. The 6-month interest rate for the market is 3%. Now that makes sense. So when we're calculating the interest expense for the bonds, 11,316,611 times 0.03 market interest rate, the bond interest expense, that's still wrong. They show you the 3% correctly, but the interest expense should be $341, $339, $498, not $630, $759. So the answer is wrong. Oh, I'm sorry. What is the total? What is the interest expense on the bonds in total for 2022? So it would be the $341,261, because that happened in 2022, plus the fourth interest payment, which would be $339,498. Why did they make it so difficult? $339,498 plus $341,261. And that's the $687,459. But in order to get this number 4's interest expense, take the carrying value of 11,316,611 times the 3% 6-month market interest rate. Hey, any questions? If you had me at 8 o'clock, you know I'm on a roll today. Man, oh man. All right, as long as I didn't confuse you. Next, we're shifting gears now. Oh, thank God, right? We only got 20 minutes left. We're going into talk about long-term notes. They're accounted for much like a bond, but we're going to show you some of the variations here. Remember, when a company borrows cash from a bank, they sign a promissory note, and the firm's liability, so the corporation will report a note payable. Before we borrow from the public, bonds payable, sold bonds. When we go to a bank, we're going to borrow, and it's a note payable. So we're going to focus on us over here, the borrower. Let's go right into some examples. January 1, Skill Graphics, product labeling graphics firm, borrowed $700,000 cash from First Bank and issued a 3-year $700,000 promissory note. Interest of $42,000 was payable semi-annually. Oh, look at that. It's very similar to our bond, but instead of selling a bond, they went to a bank and borrowed it. The day they borrowed the money, Skill Graphics, that's us, the borrower will debit cash for $700,000, credit notes payable. They also show us what First Bank will do. They'll debit notes receivable and credit cash, because that's what, to the bank, this is a note receivable. They give us the cash. At the end of 6 months, Skill Graphics will debit interest expense and credit cash for the $700,000 times the interest rate. Okay, and they gave us the amount of $42,000. So it's what, 12%, I think. 700,000, 12% times 6/12. First Bank will debit cash and credit interest revenue. So you could see these are very similar to when you sell a bond, just that this is a loan from a bank. The day the note matures, Skill Graphics will debit notes payable to reduce that liability and credit cash because they're paying it off. The bank will debit cash and credit note receivable. So that's on our maturity date. So very similar to when we sell a bond for face value. It's just that when it's a loan from a bank, we're using the words notes payable to describe the liability instead of bonds. Now, just want to make sure I don't have any chats or anything happening here that I'm not seeing. Okay. So now let's, change it up a little as we always do. Skill Graphics purchased a package labeling machine from Hughes Barker Corporation by issuing a 12% $700,000 3-year note that requires interest to be paid semi-annually. This machine could have been purchased at a cash price of $666,633. So, the value of this note today is the value of the machine. So when we exchange a note for assets or services and there's no interest rate, or there's two ways that things could be provided when it comes to interest rate. The rate is not explicitly expressed on the agreement. So before, when we borrowed money from the bank came out and said, you have to pay us 12% interest and you pay us interest twice a year. But what if there isn't an interest rate on the note? Then we have to try to decide the appropriate rate when we value the assets, when the value of the asset or the service is not determinable. Now in our last, right here, we knew how much the note was for the day we purchased this asset because we knew that the asset is worth $666,633. So we will debit the asset for that much. We'll credit notes payable for $700,000, and we will credit discount on notes payable for the difference. And just like with a bond, we will recognize that discount on notes payable over time. But what if we didn't know the $666,633? So the machine exchange for the 12% note is custom made so that no cash price is available with which to work backwards to find an interest rate. In such a case, you need to impute or figure out interest. How do you do that? Use an appropriate rate that can be found externally. If we borrowed this money, how much would we usually pay in interest? Or use what we call substance over form. So here we could say, well, we usually borrow interest at 14%. That's the market interest rate. Okay, so we could work backwards and figure out that cost of the machine by guessing or using an interest rate that we would be borrowing money at. So even though they don't explicitly come out and say, here's how much the machine cost, you could figure that out by using the market interest rate and discounting back, like we do for a bond, the principal and the interest payments over time. When you record the machine, you'll debit the machinery for the actual cost, credit notes payable, and the difference is put into discount on notes payable. And just like a bond, it will be removed and amortized. That's interest. The difference between the machinery's selling price and the note you're going to pay off ultimately, that's interest. So we got to recognize that over time, just like we did with a bond discount. Notes receivables would be debited back at the seller's, sales revenue credited, and the difference also is interest to that company, but for them it'll be interest revenue. So right now we store it in the discount on notes receivable, contra to notes receivable, and recognize it as interest revenue over time. So these mirror each other. So what happens? Well, on the first interest payment date, when the company pays cash of $42,000, they're going to credit the cash. How much do they debit interest expense for? Just like we did with the bond amortization table, effective interest method, we say, what's the current outstanding balance of the bond, of the note? So I'm going to go ahead back. $666,633. What's the effective rate of interest? I believe it was at 14% times time, 6/12. So we're going to debit interest expense, $46,664. The difference between the 14% interest market rate times time times that outstanding balance at the beginning of the interest calculation period. And the actual cash paid is how much of the discount will be removed. So if you're going, I'm not following this, let me take you back. Because the variables in this problem are exactly like they were right there. So, but instead of borrowing through a bond, this company borrowed with a loan. They're going to pay back $700,000. They're going to pay interest over the life of the loan. But how much did they actually borrow up front? $666,633. The difference between what they borrowed up front and what they paid back was stored in a discount on notes payable and will be recognized and reduced over the life of the note. So we could use the same amortization schedule for the note because it has the same characteristics as the bond. It's just that our journal entry will differ because it's a different type of liability. So let me go back here. And there it is. Now over at Hugh Barker, the seller, they're going to receive cash on the interest payment date. They're going to credit interest revenue for the total amount of interest revenue, which would be, again, the 14% times time times the outstanding balance at the beginning of the interest payment, and then reduce their discount on note receivable by debiting it. I know it gets kind of confusing when you have the borrower and the lender's information here, but that's how normally in intermediate accounting we do it. There's the amortization schedule for the loan. So again, you figure it out the same exact way. Outstanding balance times your implicit interest rate, which was 7% times, or 14% times time of 6/12. How much actual cash interest is being paid by the borrower? 700,000 times 12% times 6/12. You could go back and take a look at that slide. And then the difference is reducing the discount. And you keep calculating that way. The outstanding balance of a note payable is calculated the same way as a bond payable. Note payable face 700,000 minus the new balance in discount on notes payable. Over the life of the note, you will recognize all the discount, meaning you'll take it out of the discount account and put it into the interest expense account. And that's what you're accomplishing there. Oh, sorry. Any questions? Just want to see where I stand right now. I filled you up with a lot of stuff today, didn't I? Installment notes, same thing. I think we'll be okay there. You guys can take a look through installment notes. Okay. One or two things before we wrap up. So you could take a look through installment notes. We do them the same way as we did the bonds and the notes payable. If you have questions on them, you could ask on Thursday. Financial statement disclosures. We need to disclose in the notes to our financial statements when it comes to notes payable or bonds payable, the nature of the company liabilities, all of our liabilities, the interest rates on all of our liabilities, the maturity dates, something called the call provisions and the conversion options. Now, we talked a little bit about that the other day. Maybe our bonds that we sell have the ability to be called back early. We can, and it's on the bond certificate if that characteristic is attached that says the corporation has the right to pay these off before maturity, and here's how much they'll be paid, you know, how much the corporation will pay for the bond. The conversion option, we talked about this as well, that, and we're not gonna have time to do it today, and it's just too late in the process to open your minds up to something brand new like this. So conversion option is when the company or the bondholder, really, the bondholder has the right to convert their bond into company stock. So instead of receiving payment in cash to pay off the bondholder opts to take stock instead. Any kind of restrictions that are imposed by the creditors should be listed in the disclosure notes, as well as any assets pledged as collateral. So there's a lot of information that must be disclosed in the notes to the financial statements related to long-term liabilities. And that's just a text question. All of this stuff should be disclosed. Okay, so I think I'm going to end there. We still have a little bit more to go in discussing debt, but you have enough to work on your homework problem and be working in your exercises. Let me just grab your problems that I'd like you to have done for Thursday. I want you to look at these and try them. You think I'd print this stuff out already, huh? We go by modified date. Okay, I'm almost there. Oh, hold on a second. I must have stored it somewhere else. There, where it is. Okay. Hopefully I'll be in more on top of my game on Thursday. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I'm still not finding my stuff correctly. And there, assignment listing. Okay. So for Thursday, let's have you have 14. Let me double check what these problems are. 14.1, and I only have you doing parts 1 and 2, and I think P14-6, problem part 1A. But let me just double check these in your book, and I don't have my book at home. Great, huh? It's at school. But I do have my ebook. So make sure those are cool to do. Come on. So I'm in the book. Go to chapter 14 and problems. All right. So problem 14.1 you'll be cool with. It's selling a bond, and we're going to look at it from okay, so you're selling a bond and you're going to do some journal entries related to the issuer, the corporation selling it, and the investor, the corporation purchasing it. I'm going to have you do parts 1 and 2. Actually, I'm just going to have you do it from the issuing company's perspective. Then 14, if we have time, we'll look at it from the other perspective. Hold on a second. Oh, that's P14.6. I'm not too excited about that now that I look at it. Let me see if there's a different one we could do. Here we go. P14-7. Have you practice that? Do number 1. 1 through 4. Might as well do all parts. So P14-1, parts 1 and 2, and then P14-7, parts 1 through 4, all 4. Now we do have one more problem listed, but I think, no, we could do it. Let's take a look at P14-12. Okay, so and I'll put this out in the announcements, for Thursday, you'll be able to get P14-1 parts 1 and 2, P14-7 1 through 4, and P14-12. Please make a real good effort at computing these and looking at them and making sure you understand them so you're prepared for the test that will be coming up and due. Any questions? All right, guys. Well, then I think we are finished. Looking for you there. I lost you all. So if you have any questions between now and Thursday, you can email me. If not, look for the link. I'll put it out into Learn, and I'll see us all on Thursday. Thanks for coming. And be safe. Stay inside.